This is Lumive, and I want to say thank you for being so flexible with us as we've canceled our live journalism forum. This is due to unforeseen circumstances with once-in-a-decade weather in the Bay Area. Many of our speakers and Lumive helpers have gone without power and Wi-Fi for at least 24 hours. Luckily, things are looking up now and it's beginning to be sunny. However, these incidences caused us to change our schedule. Today's journalism forum will show us the day-to-day life of a journalist and how their passions have pushed them into this career. It's recommended that if you were to join this career, you are passionate for writing, curious, and more. Follow along to see our speakers, Miss Karen Kaplan, the Science and Medicine Editor at LA Times, and Miss Nanette Asimov, the Higher Education and Health Reporter at SF Gate, to speak about their experiences. I hope you enjoy.
Well, I went to a pretty large public high school in San Diego, and we had a newspaper that came out probably every 2 or 3 weeks, as I recall. So it was a way to get a lot of experience. We covered mostly stuff on campus and not that much in the community, but that was my first introduction to actually working in something resembling real journalism, and got, I think I was sports editor for a while and a news editor, and eventually became editor of the paper and learned a lot of hands-on stuff that way. To me, there's no substitute for just like actually reporting a story that's really going to get published, as opposed to having assignments in classrooms. So, my advice is always try to go out there and get whatever real life experience you can, even if it's unpaid. It's just being right, knowing that people are really going to read your work is, just way more realistic and motivating than turning in an assignment that only a teacher's going to read. And then while I was in high school, I got 2 or 3 different jobs working for local publications. They were pretty small community newspapers, and one was military publication. San Diego's even bigger military presence back then. And, it wasn't like my long-term goal to work at a place like either of those, but, you got to build up step by step. And I have always found that the most important part when you're applying for a job in anything related to journalism is people want to see your clips, the stories that you have written, and whoever will give you the opportunity to write, that will help you. So, building up, going from a small community place to a larger community place to maybe a local paper to a larger local paper to a regional paper, it all starts somewhere. And so there's really nothing that's too small to be your starting point.
Nanette, could you share your experiences as a youth and connected to journalism?
Absolutely. I think I agree with everything that Karen just said. And I kind of represent the opposite, because I never worked on my school newspaper. I never went, from small paper to large paper. And I discovered that I love journalism, though, because, well, first of all, my father was a journalist, and so he would come home and tell stories at the dinner table about his day. And of course, the last thing you want to do is the same thing your father does. You want to find your own path. So I never worked on the paper. And then just living life in high school. And I also grew up went to a public school. Mine was kind of small public school and on Long Island in New York. But I found out that I really liked to write. I really liked talking to people. I was interested in politics and stuff going on. And so what did that all add up to? It all added up to journalism. And but I didn't know how to do it. So I got so I guess the thing to say is I realized I was competing with a lot of people like Karen, who'd been doing journalism and reporting stories, for years, and I didn't know anything. And so my father suggested learning to do copy editing, which is that sort of thankless job of correcting people's grammar on their stories. And so I got an internship doing copy editing, and the plan was to try and get a job on a good newspaper, because nobody wants to be a copy editor. And so the competition is very low. And that was what happened. I was able to slip into a job at the San Francisco Chronicle many years ago, because it was one of the largest papers in the country, but they still needed copy editors, and they had reporters trying to beat down the door, and I just went in as a copy editor and moved over eventually to be a reporter, and that's my story.
That's a great idea.
We have people like that at the LA Times. It definitely works.
So if you could explain your career, maybe your day-to-day life and your work-life balance, maybe Miss Karen again.
Well, I think work-life balance kind of went out the window with the pandemic, unfortunately, mainly because of just working at home. What people say, the flip side of that is that you're living at work. And I've definitely found that to be true, although I certainly don't miss my commute into the office, which I haven't been doing since we shut down in March of 2020. It's open now, but they haven't forced people to go back, and I'm totally fine with that. But in general, I think that journalism can be a really good work-life balance kind of career, as long as you're not covering super breaking news, which as a science journalist, there's very little daily breaking news that you don't see coming, except for the pandemic. But for the most part, like things that are science stories, like a breaking story in science used to be like a big journal publication, like they figured out how to clone dogs, or some big discovery about, the James Webb Space Telescope makes a big discovery about supernovas or gravity waves or whatever. And we get a heads up under embargo. So we have time in advance to plan those stories and have them ready to go when the embargo lifts. So there's not this like drop everything you have and write something in the next half hour situation, no matter what else is going on, whether you have to like pick up your kids from school or what have you. So it's generally speaking a really nice career for that. And frankly, one of the things that I mean, what drew me to journalism originally was the idea of that it's important for people to be involved in their communities, especially voting, and in order for people to have good outcomes, it's good if they're informed, and a lot of things that seem boring are important for people to know. And so it's a good challenge to try to make people interested in stuff that they don't realize that they is interesting, and show them that it is interesting and that they should be engaged and informed, and make their voices heard. So not necessarily in any particular direction, just that they be participating. And that still is like the overarching thing that makes me, love my job. But a thing that made it also seem like a practical thing to pursue is that, every city has a newspaper. This is a little less true than it was back in the 80s and 90s, but still most places have a newspaper, and you could do it from anywhere, and it can be very flexible, which is great. And now, like, working at home, there's periods where I like have to just be like gone for an hour to drive my kids somewhere or something like that, but I can work around that, and I can do some extra work after dinner or whatever, and not be feeling behind when the next day starts. And I like that, projects can be kind of broken up into chunks, like little pieces you can do a little at a time. So, I don't have to finish an entire story all in one go to make it done. I can work on a part of it or edit one story and then set work aside and come back and pick up a different story later and, not, and still feel productive and be focused. So it's really good if you are interested in a lot of things and have maybe a shorter attention span. Like, I can't imagine writing an entire book or even like a New Yorker style magazine article. I could not stay focused on one thing that long. But for a general interest newspaper and their website, it's like the sweet spot for me.
Thank you. Yes, if Nanette could share her opinion as well on this.
Sure. I just want to say that I think I hear a lot of love for journalism coming from Karen, and I share that too. And I think you will hear a lot of journalists saying how much they love what they do. So I've been working at the San Francisco Chronicle for several decades, let's just say, but every single day is different. It's such an exciting career. Just today, I was writing about long COVID, which everybody knows now is, the effect that you can get when you get COVID, and it can last for a long time. So I have talked to a lot of people who have long COVID and hear their stories. You can sit down with somebody and hear their life story and get paid for it. And then the next day you can go and you can cover a riot at, in a city, like when often this happens, well, not often, but I have covered riots from student protesters, for example, who are rampaging in the street, and, you're running after them with your pad and your recorder and trying to capture it. And that's, it's quite exciting. Or you, are talking to the police about something that just went on. And so every single day is different. And I love what I do, even after all these decades. And I also work from home now since the pandemic. And we're supposed to now go back to the office once a week. So that's kind of nice because, newsroom culture. And I think even though there are fewer newspapers, there's still this thing called the newsroom culture that is an exciting place where everybody's together and talking about their stories. And there's a energy in the newsroom that I miss from since the pandemic. But you asked about work-life balance. I guess if I were covering police all the time, I'd always have to run out and maybe cover things at night and on the weekend, and that wouldn't be such a good balance. But I write about education and health, and so I do get to plan my day a little bit. And it's just my favorite day is just when I get to sit and write for the whole day, because that's what I like to do. But I've met so many people, and I never would have been able to do that without journalism. And I think the stories that I've written, some of them have made a difference. People read them and learn something. They've changed laws sometimes. That's been kind of exciting. And yeah, you can make a difference if you pick this career.
And, it lasts for like a really long time. Like, I got an email like a month ago about a story I wrote at least 10 years ago, but is on the web, and somebody found it. It was about a study about how many times on average you have to try IVF before it works. And it was like more times than, people were kind of assuming. And this one woman she said she was like kind of at her wit's end because it wasn't working for her. And she was like really depressed about it. And then read this article that said something, I forget how many cycles on average it was, but she was like going to do one more cycle, which would have hit this average. And it gave her hope that it wasn't like futile, that it could work. And in her case, it did work. And she just was like, so, thrilled that she hadn't given up, and that this article, gave her hope. And it's not really my article. It's the research that I wrote about. That's the thing that, truly was the thing that, she should credit. But, she learned about it because she read about a story I wrote, and she was, I still get emails from her now, just that things that you like, we don't even remember doing, made a huge impact on other people, and we
Yes.
don't even really know about it. And especially considering the fact that most reader email that I get these days, is hate mail, I guess, like not complimentary. Basically, telling me
It's
I'm a shill
okay
for
for
the farmers.
journalists.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh yeah, it's par for the course, but it's definitely gotten worse since just the whole country has become more partisan in the past however many years. But like, I'm not employed by the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not paid off by the government to say such and such. But there's a lot of not just criticism in your inbox, but like really like mean personal attack kind of stuff. So it's nice to hear from these people who have positive things to say. And like, I've been writing this coronavirus newsletter as part of my editing job for the almost the past 2 years, and I was editing it before when we used to have somebody else writing it. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm really sick of thinking about and writing about COVID. But I know, like, on the bigger picture, it's the emails that we get from people who are appreciative that we're still paying attention to it,
Yeah.
and for people who still care that we're still giving them the latest information, because risks are changing all the time. um, Getting those uh, emails from real people, knowing that it's not just like going out into the ether. It's like landing with people who are making decisions based on it. That's the best it gets. More than even changing a lot for me, more than changing a policy, or like, I just edited a story that got a book pulled from publication, because it had plagiarism in it. Like, that's cool to make an impact, but like, for regular readers to find that they're making life decisions based on things that we're reporting, that's, to me, that's why I got into it. So I find those comments the most fulfilling.
After hearing about these benefits, such as the impact and your work-life scheduling, could you list any disadvantages and kind of cons to your work life?
Oh yeah, well, I don't, well, my work life, or just sort of getting into the field in
Or your
general.
career, however you
Yeah, I
choose
mean,
to brand.
I feel like I would have a really hard time recommending it to somebody who's just starting out, unless they really feel passionate that they love this field, because it's just, I see it getting harder and harder for new people. There's fewer available jobs. Those jobs pay less than they probably did, when I got started, because more of them are freelance kind of gigs and not full-time staff jobs, because there's just fewer places hiring, and the places that are still in business have fewer people working for them. And then on the flip side, if you're going to graduate school specifically for journalism, your debt from that is higher than it would have been back when I was starting out. So, this combination of, you know, higher debt and lower expected income just makes it like, don't do this unless you really love it. And I say that as somebody who totally believes that there should be journalism in the world. And I hope more people figure out business models that make it sustainable. But if I were earlier in my career, I'd certainly be more worried. Would I ever be able to buy a house on a journalist's income? Just practical things like that.
So I'm going to offer a slightly alternative point of view, because I think that what you said is true, but I feel like if you start from the idea that journalism is a critical, important part of our democracy, we need journalists. We have to have independent watchdogs, because that's what we are. And that's why Karen was saying that sometimes she gets hate mail, as do I, because you don't write stories to make people happy or please them. You write your stories to inform the public, and sometimes that means revealing information that companies or agencies or schools don't want you to reveal, but that the public needs to know about. So we need journalists. But if you want to be a journalist, I say, don't be discouraged by the fact that you're not going to make $1 million, or that there are fewer traditional newsrooms, find a way, because there really are more outlets that are online now. There's other ways to become a journalist. All you need to do is find them, and they really are out there. There's the San Francisco Standard is a newspaper that just opened in San Francisco. It's an online publication, and I'm seeing newsrooms open all the time because of online ability. All you need to do is understand the principles of journalism, and not, I mean, one thing that I think a lot of the public really doesn't understand about journalism is that it's not our opinion. A lot of readers think that a reporter can just spew out our opinion about things and that's my story, but that's the hardest thing maybe to learn, is that a journalist's opinion simply doesn't matter unless your whole job is writing your opinions and you're a blogger. But journalists, we don't have, in fact, I would be fired if I injected my opinion into a story. The important thing is to be able to sit at a meeting, interview somebody, tell a story about what's really happening in the world. And there are ways to do this, even if it's not the traditional newsroom that Karen and I grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a podcast now, or
Yeah.
somebody, just doing YouTube videos or something. I hope, however, anybody can find a way to monetize it, I'm all for it. But I think that's another thing that the public doesn't understand, in addition to the fact that, like, these are not our opinions, these are reported facts. They don't understand that it costs money to gather those facts. I mean,
Right.
people are used to news being free, and because you can get it on Google if you search for it. But
it's our work that they're getting.
Right, and it makes people think, like, I don't need to pay for this. They hit a paywall and you just go somewhere else looking for the same story or something. And hopefully somebody will figure out ways to change people's minds or make micropayments happen or something. But I totally agree with Nanette that we definitely need journalists. We always need journalists, and there are real studies showing that in states where local newspapers have closed down, there's more corruption, and especially in the state government level. Like,
Yes.
that's the level where things get lost. Like, there's usually somebody paying enough attention to their city council or their mayor, but their state capital and state government may be further away, and it's sort of like a diffuse responsibility among all the local papers in a state, and things, just, there's more, waste and corruption, and when there aren't these watchdogs. So it's definitely important, and I hope there are people who are sincerely interested in going into it. Those are the people who should pursue it, and I hope there's enough of them.
As a final question, if you could think of any adjectives or nouns that accurately describe your personal values that help you, assist you in your everyday job, if you could think of anything or any characteristics that you believe that assist you in your everyday life, that allow you to have a passion for journalism.
Well, passion for it
Go
and
ahead, Karen,
assist
go
you
first.
in doing it, like, well, do you want to take this one first, since I'm always going first? You can, if you want to.
No, go ahead. Let's keep the pattern.
Okay. So, like, in terms of doing my everyday job, like, so facts, truth, like, you want to make sure you've got something verifiable, and, like, just because you've, like, heard something, you got to track down. Like, that's a good thing about having things online. Like, I like to put in a lot of links to facts that we put, like statistics about COVID or vaccine efficacy or whatever, so, like, it's got to be verifiable facts. And then clarity is another one, especially with science, that there's a lot of concepts that me and my reporters can understand, but if it doesn't make sense to our readers, it's useless, and so we want to make sure, like, that's the real trick in science reporting, I think, is to translate things, that complicated concepts, into language that a non-scientific audience can understand, and also to like walk them through the scientific method without them realizing it, so they know why these facts we have are, why they're facts and not just opinions. Let's see, other things in, you want to be engaging, and I'm always trying to stay away from like being clickbaity, which is like not a real word, but I feel like there's so many gimmicks out there to try to get people to click on a headline. And as a reader, I really hate being in a position where I feel like there was a bait and switch, like somebody had a really clever headline and I read it expecting something really interesting, and it was really just, that wasn't the point of the story, or there was some kind of trick to get my click. And so I am always trying to steer clear of doing that to readers, because I think in the long term it will just turn people off of us and not be good for our credibility. That's probably, I'll throw the ball over now. I try to think of more.
Okay, you asked for adjectives and nouns. So I will try honest. I think a journalist must have a commitment to honesty. Integrity. I think a journalist has to be trustworthy and have high integrity. You can't fool your readers. I think a journalist has to be empathetic so that you can talk to somebody and listen to what they say and translate it honestly. You're not going to record somebody's statements and just put it out there. You're going to take what they say and weave it into your story. You have to do that with empathy and sensitivity, and with a commitment to reflecting what that person really wants to say to the world. I think you need to be clear, and not so I guess I would say you have to be able to put yourself, when you're a writer, you have to put yourself in the place of your reader. Maybe that falls into empathy. You have to imagine that person reading your story, and write it so that they will understand it. It's not going to be my job just to throw 1,000 words onto a piece of paper if the person reading it isn't going to understand it. So I have to have that person in my head and figure what's the best way to translate my information so that it means something to them. I also think a sense of humor, where if I'm boring, I'm really not gonna get you as my reader. So I need to write something in a way that's clear and, I mean, not funny necessarily, but lighthearted. It's not a scientific paper. It's a news story about what's happening down the block or in the local school. So there's some lightness to it. We have to write the way we talk, the way you talk to your mom or your neighbor or your teacher. So those are my adjectives and nouns.
Yeah, I'll throw in also like curiosity is a main thing. Like you want to be somebody who like kind of looks at the world and wonders like, why is it this way, or does it have to be this way? Things that can be like systemic problems that other people would take for granted. A journalist could look at that and say, well, why isn't something being done about that, or could something be done about that, or how did we get to this spot? And
yes.
Yeah.
And fearlessness. Mm-hmm. It is our job to realize that we live in a free society, and I can walk into any public institution and look at the documents and look at the information and we can talk to the president if we can get past the the staff, but we're allowed to talk to the president. I've visited countries where you can't even go into the government buildings because you're merely a stranger. But here the public buildings are our buildings that we pay for. We're the taxpayers. We have the right to examine the documents. And when public officials erroneously say, no, this is not for you, because they do that. It's our job to be fearless and say, yes, I want to see that, and I will see that. And by the way, my deadline is 5 o'clock. So, we have to, we can't be too shy in our job.
Shouldn't be shy at all. I mean, respectful of people, but yeah, not, not shy.
We can be shy. I am a shy person. I really am. I'm a shy.
But in your
kind of
journalist role,
extroverted.
are you? I mean, I kind of feel like
In my what?
I'm in your journalism role. Like when I'm my private citizen, sometimes I'm like, I just don't feel like haggling with this person about this or whatever. But if I'm acting on behalf of the newspaper, and therefore our readers, then I'm like much more bold about, going after things and
I am
calling
a
people
shy,
up.
fearless person.
Okay.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
I will do what has to be done because I know that I have the right to do it and I'm not afraid to do it. But I still think of myself as a little shy.
And I think creative is another word that we really need these days. Like we have like a section heads at meeting every day where we're focused on figuring out not just like what stories are we going to focus on for today, but what are some creative ways to tell them, instead of just writing, 20 inches of words, can we do this through some kind of interactive graphic, or would a video be better? Or, I'm not involved with this personally, but we have an audience engagement team that hired a puppeteer, and we do puppets, demonstrate. They're not quite puppet shows, but I mean, we use these puppets to try to reach people, because it's no good for us to just sit here and say, we're producing great journalism, we're winning Pulitzer Prizes, and if people aren't reading us, it's on them. Like, no, it's actually on us, because we're going to go out of business if we can't engage people. And I'm all for, being creative and trying new things to try to reach people where they are, which isn't the same as pandering to them or selling out or whatever. You just have to be creative to get people to care and engage with you, when the traditional stuff isn't working. So we definitely need creativity these days.
Thank you for all your input. I feel like the conversation flowed really well, and I feel like your insights were really good to shine a positive light on journalism. As you mentioned, it is dwindling in the traditional sense, almost, with less physical brick and mortar newspapers coming out. However, I do see like a new light of journalism coming through, with YouTube journalism often reporting about the new recent events in the social world with celebrities and the such. So I do see a really good opportunity for newfound journalism now. So so thank you. I think I'll end the call now, but thank you so much for helping me with this project, and I hope you guys all have a great day.
You too. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thanks. I'm glad there's people out there who want to hear about journalism, and that gives me hope.
Me too.